Today I am bringing you my February reading wrap-up. We are going to be talking about the 9 books that I finished in February. I started the month with a 2-star read and I finished with a 5-star read, so that should tell you everything you need to know about how my reading went last month. I am going to have timestamps in the description just in case you would like to skip around. We're going to start with my lowest rated and then we'll move through the month and finish on a high. So the first book that I read in February, well, I think I started it at the end of January, but I finished it in February, and that was The Crash by Frida McFadden. I'm not going to talk about this book too much because I do have a dedicated review for this. It does have spoilers, so I would only recommend watching it if you have no intention of reading this book, but honestly, I did not like this book. I don't think it's a very good place to start with Frida McFadden books if you are thinking about trying some of her books. I actually thought it was kind of boring, and I never thought I would say that about a Frida McFadden book. So in this, we are following a main character called Tegan, who is 8 months pregnant, and she is driving to visit her brother when she gets caught in a snowstorm and her car goes off the road. She is trapped there and she is thinking the worst when thankfully this guy is driving past in a truck. He saves her, takes her back to his home where he lives with his wife, who happens to be a nurse. So they set her up in the basement and say to her that they're going to take care of her until the road's clear and they can get her to a hospital. Tegan, however, begins to suspect that she is in grave danger, and that is all you need to know about the plot. There were 3 main reasons why I didn't like this book. First of all, I thought the mental health representation was not good, and I understand it's a popcorn thriller and it's not meant to be taken too seriously, but there's just certain topics that I don't enjoy reading about in a popcorn thriller. I would be okay with reading about them in literary fiction or other types of fiction or non-fiction, but in a popcorn thriller I'm reading those books for entertainment, and there's certain things that I just don't find entertaining. I also found the entire middle section really tedious because as the reader we are given information that Tegan doesn't have, and so you're watching this woman make mistake after mistake, and it was just so frustrating. Tegan also imagines her unborn child talking to her in her mind, and I didn't like listening to that because the audiobook narrator was putting on this baby voice and it was just horrible. Those were the main reasons why I didn't like this book. There was a small moment where it felt like the author was acknowledging how this book, to me at least, it seemed like it was inspired by Misery by Stephen King, and that's one of my favourite Stephen King books. So the premise of this, I should have at least liked it. I also hated the ending as well. I can't tell you why because it would be major spoilers, but this was not the ending that I wanted. I don't enjoy this type of ending. So yeah, that's why I gave it 2 stars. I am reaching a point where I feel like I need to stop reading Frida McFadden books. She was one of my most read authors last year, and I don't think I gave any of her books higher than like a 3.5 stars. Next up, I read Famous Last Words by Gillian McAllister, which I gave 4 stars. This I thought was a very solid crime mystery thriller. It follows a woman who one morning learns that her husband is involved in this hostage situation. However, he is not one of the hostages. He is the person holding them hostage. And the events unfold from there. I'm not going to go too much into specifics on the plot because this did not go in the direction that I was expecting. However, I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. I don't know whether it's a good thing as well. Trying to be really vague so I don't spoil anything, but basically this has a particular crime element, which I don't mind reading once from an author. However, after the first time, I just start to find it a little bit, not lazy, it's just not my favourite thing to read about. Her books are a lot more character driven than I personally prefer in my thrillers. However, I do like the way that she crafts a mystery, so would recommend this. I thought it had a decent amount of suspense, but also moments of action, and the pacing was really well done. Next up, I read Queen of Shadows by Sarah J Maas, which is the fourth novel in the Throne of Glass series. It's the fifth book overall, if you count Assassin's Blade, and I liked this. I gave it 5 stars. Really liked the ending of this and how it was very action driven. There were some really emotional moments throughout this, and I just like these characters. I find it a really fun series, even though there was something about this book that made my skin crawl, and if you've read it, you know, but there was a particular perspective I did not enjoy reading from. That's all I'm going to say, because of obviously spoilers. But yeah, very excited to continue this series. I'm planning on picking up the next book in March. If the camera angle has changed slightly, it's because I have lost my favourite camera battery, and so I'm having to use my backups, which just don't last long enough to film a sit-down video. So if the angle keeps changing throughout this video, then that is why. I have ordered a new one, which should be here tomorrow, but I didn't want to wait before filming this wrap-up. So next on my list to talk about is Everyone on This Train is a Suspect by Benjamin Stevenson. This is the sequel to Everyone in My Family Has Killed Someone, which I read in January. I don't think I would like the writing in this as much if I were reading it physically compared to listening to the audiobook, because the narrator regularly breaks the fourth wall and addresses you as the reader to try and bring you into the story. And usually that's not something that I like. However, it works on audio. I feel like I'm listening to someone actually tell me something that really happened because it's written that way. It's very self-aware and it doesn't take itself too seriously, and it's written as if it's non-fiction, even though it's clearly not, at least as far as I know. If you enjoyed Knives Out and Glass Onion and you're looking for a book that has similar vibes, then I would recommend picking up this series. Like I said, the first book is called Everyone in My Family Has Killed Someone. In this one, it is a standalone story, so you technically could read it if you haven't read the first book. It doesn't spoil anything. I don't know why you would want to do that, but you could do that if you wanted to. In this, we are following our main character, Ernest Cunningham, again, as he is taking part in this literary festival. It's set on this train that is going across Australia. The first book had like a snowy vibe because it was set at a ski resort, whereas this is set in the desert, and I do think the atmosphere was done well. This series has a lot of humour, and sometimes that humour doesn't quite land for me, but there are still some funny moments and some moments that make me smile and laugh, and I don't usually like those kind of books. Usually when I say I find a book fun, what I'm finding fun is not necessarily funny, whereas this series does have a lot of humour. I don't think the reveals in this were as clever or as satisfying as in book 1, but it was still a good time, and I gave it 4 stars. I do also have a soft spot for books that are either about books or about authors, and because this is centering around a literary festival, there's a lot of characters who are writers, or there are people who work within the publishing industry, and I thought it was still cleverly done, even though I don't think it was as clever as the first book. I will be continuing this series though. I know that there's a novella that is set at Christmas time, so I'm going to wait till December before I read that, but I'm sure there are going to be more books in this series, and I am excited to pick them up once they come out. Moving on to The Centre by Aisha Manazir Siddiqui. This is literary fiction with a horror twist, and I will say, if you're reading this because you want a horror book, you might find it a bit of a slow burn because the horror elements don't come to fruition until the second half of the book. In this, we are basically following a main character who is from Pakistan, but she now lives in London, and she's been living there since she was 18. She's now, I think, in her mid-30s. She works as a translator, translating Bollywood films, subtitles on Bollywood films. However, she really wants to become a translator of what she sees as great works of literature. She ends up meeting this guy who seems to be a savant when it comes to languages. He can speak multiple languages, and she is really impressed because he has a very well-paid job working within like translation. She tries to teach him a few words and phrases in Urdu, but he seems to struggle with grasping it. So you can imagine her surprise when one day he surprises her by being able to speak it fluently, and her initial reaction is, "You must have been lying to me this whole time because you can speak it better than I can." In his desperation to apologise and placate her, he admits the truth, which is he learnt to speak all of these languages languages at this place called the Centre, which is this exclusive invite-only place where you pay a lot of money, you spend, I think it's 10 days there, and you come away being able to speak fluently any language of your choice. He ends up referring her and the story goes from there, and I found the conversations around language and translation really interesting. There's a point where the main character is either thinking or talking about how when she speaks in different languages, she feels that her personality changes, and all of those little discussions I found so interesting. It is a very short book, so I was okay with the balance, and I thought this was good. I gave it 4 stars, but I would recommend it as a literary fiction. It is horrifying, like I don't want to downplay that. There is some imagery. I was not expecting the direction this went in. I think I maybe could have guessed if I was paying more attention. I think some people would be able to guess what the twist is in this. It is dark though, so just bear that in mind. Next up, I read White Cat, Black Dog by Kelly Link, which is a collection of short stories. I bought this in Edinburgh a couple of years ago, and the bookseller was so enthusiastic about Kelly Link's writing. I've just realised I still have a bookmark in that, but this is the bookshop that I actually bought it from, Golden Hair in Edinburgh. And yeah, the way it was pitched to me was this is a collection of dark adult fairy tales, and I did get that vibe. Some of the stories were just a little bit too absurd for my personal taste. The ones that I really liked were The White Cat's Divorce, which is the first short story. Prince Hat Underground was also interesting. That is a retelling of East of the Sun, West of the Moon. Skinder's Veil, which is the last short story, was also a favourite. That one was really creepy. However, what I found with a lot of these short stories is I didn't understand the point of them, and maybe there wasn't meant to be a point. I think just because they felt like fairy tales or fables, and a lot of these are retellings of other fairy tales or stories from around the world. I think I was expecting there to be a clearer message within these, and the first one I think does have like a clear moral of the story, but with some of the others it felt like they were just vibes, and that's fine. Maybe it's me, maybe I just didn't understand. I think this is either going to be your kind of thing or it's not. I believe Kelly Link does have a full-length novel which I would be interested in picking up. I saw it in Waterstones actually recently, and it's a lot thicker than I was expecting, so might not be one I prioritise. But yeah, if you like beautiful lyrical writing, then I think Kelly Link's writing could really work for you. The next book that I picked up was Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep by Philip K. Dick. This is classic sci-fi. It came out in, I think, the 1960s, and it is the book that inspired the movie Blade Runner. I have still not seen Blade Runner. I have been trying to find time over the last few weeks to sit down and watch both movies because I know a sequel came out a few years ago. Haven't had the time yet. However, I think I would really like the movies. I liked this book but didn't love it. I thought the concept and the ideas were really interesting. There was something about the writing that felt just a little off to me. There would be these moments where a character would say something and I would think, whoa, how did we get from there to there? Like, it felt a bit rushed in places, and also some of the language wasn't great. I know that this is a classic book, but it still annoys me when I come across sexism within the writing, and every single woman in this was described based on her body, and it just started to really irritate me the more that I was noticing it. For anyone who doesn't know what this book is about, it is set in a futuristic world where there was some kind of war, and so many people left Earth and moved into space to the colonies. There are still people living back on Earth though, and owning an animal now is seen as a type of status symbol. That was a really interesting conversation actually. I thought how even in this futuristic world, people are still trying to keep up with the Joneses, so to speak. So our main character, he really wants to own an animal. However, he only has an electric sheep. He works as a bounty hunter and he finds that he's given this opportunity to earn a lot of money quite quickly, which means he'll be able to afford an animal because animals now are incredibly rare and expensive. His job is to basically track down androids, and the way that they distinguish androids from humans, because they look exactly the same, the way that they test someone to see if they're an android is they use an empathy test. And again, I thought the discussion in this around empathy and how humans see themselves as human because of their ability to feel empathy. They even have a religion that's based around empathy. You can touch this device and have this shared experience with everyone else who is touching this same device in their homes. However, they don't have empathy for the androids, and this, whenever I talk about it, I feel like I'm talking about it in a really enthusiastic way because this was so interesting. There were some scenes in this that felt really intense. I just didn't like the way the story was executed. So I will be watching the movie because I think I would enjoy this story more watching it on screen. I have heard that the movie is quite different though, and there's certain scenes in this that aren't in the movie. So I only have 2 more books left to talk about. The first of which is Deadhouse Gates by Stephen Erickson. This is the second book in the Malazan Book of the Fallen series. If you have read this series and you want my spoiler thoughts, I do have a video which I'll leave linked in the cards and in the description. In terms of my spoiler-free thoughts, I think it is worth continuing this series if you liked book 1 or thought it was just kind of okay. If you hated it, it's not going to improve for you, I don't think, with the second book. However, if you saw potential with the first book, I think it is worth continuing because this had a better storyline in my opinion. It was a lot more engaging and easier to follow. It has some really emotionally impactful moments and I gave this 4 stars. It wasn't quite a 5 stars for me, mostly because of the writing. So the way that Stephen Erickson writes, he drops you into this world and he doesn't give you a lot of exposition. He doesn't unnecessarily explain stuff. If 2 characters are having a conversation about something that they already know about, they don't explain stuff for the purpose of the reader. And so it feels like a very organic way to build a plot and to build a world. However, when it comes to the characters, I'm struggling to connect to them. I feel like there's this barrier, this distance from them. I don't know whether I'm explaining it very well, but all of that to say, I enjoyed this second book and I will be continuing with book 3, hopefully towards the end of March or early April. And then the final book that I have to talk about is The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet by Becky Chambers. This was 5 stars. I am so annoyed at myself for not reading this sooner. This has been sat on my shelves for a good few years. I think I also bought this when I went to Edinburgh, and that was about 2 years ago, so it's been a while since I bought this book, but I loved this so much. For anyone who doesn't know, this is a cozy sci-fi. We're following the crew of this ship called the Wayfarer, and I'm not good with the terminology, but their job with the ship is to punch holes through the galaxy to better improve transport links. It does explain it in the book that this ship is specially designed for this job, and that's not really important. Like, the plot for this is they're given this opportunity to do this mission that is going to pay them a lot of money, but it's also quite dangerous. That is the plot. But the point of this book is the characters and their relationships and the found family. It's so wholesome. One of the characters we're introduced to is Rosemary, who is a human, and she is joining this ship as a new recruit. And there's a lot in this about culture and how different species have different beliefs and customs, and I thought that there was just so much care that went into this book. It was so wholesome and I just loved these characters. I know that future books don't necessarily follow these same characters. This is a series, by the way, if I haven't mentioned that already. I think the next book follows side characters from this book. Definitely plan on continuing this series because this was one of the easiest highest 5 stars I've given out so far this year. That does bring me to the end of this video and the end of this wrap up. So thank you for watching if you made it this far. Let me know in the comments if you have read any of these books and if you have any thoughts and feelings on them. Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it, and click subscribe if you would like to see more videos from me. But otherwise, I will see you next time. Bye.